Las Concurder, and firstly I'd like to thank the Concurder and his office for selecting this issue as a topical issue. Minister Las Concurder, the freight rail service from Ballina train station to Dublin Port normally takes between 5 and 7 freight trains a week, servicing some of the biggest industries in the west of Ireland. It's a core part of our attractiveness as a location to invest in Ballina. It's served by a superb team at the Ballina railway station, and in fact the Ballina freight depot is one of the busiest freight depots in the country. However, recently and since Christmas there has been a number of disruptions to the service, but in recent weeks the service has stopped completely. And a wonderful company called IWT have been running that service. They have shown huge ambition in terms of developing that service and have further plans. But the service has come to a halt because of difficulties at Dublin Port that relate to, firstly, Brexit-related issues and the need for space, and also some other issues which have put a stop to trains going into Dublin Port. It is absolutely ridiculous, Las Concurder, to think that Dublin Port, the biggest port in the country, is no longer open to rail freight. We passed a climate action bill here last week where you're all talking about lowering emissions, and today we see that we are failing to lower those emissions. But yet a freight service that took between 5 and 7 freight trains a week, took freight off the road, is stopped. And there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of urgency in terms of resolving it. I know work is underway. I know the Department of Transport is engaging. It has very little operational issue. I know Dublin Port are engaging with IWT and with Irish Rail, but there needs to be an urgency. But Minister, I would put it to you, and I want to acknowledge Minister Naughton's engagement in this. I know she can't be here this evening, but I will put it to you that the Department of Transport needs to get serious about rail services in the west of Ireland. It doesn't believe in them. We are an AOB item when it comes to rail services. This is a service that works, that's profitable, that delivers on so many issues, and yet there's no urgency within the department to resolve it. It is typical of the department's approach to rail transport in the West.
Deputy James Lawless, 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Las Concurder. Minister, thanks for taking the debate this evening, and I know this is an issue very close to Deputy Cleary's heart, and indeed he's argued the case for Mayo very well, very strongly in number 4 on this issue. Minister, I was astounded to read this article I read in the Irish Times last week that freight services through rail at Dublin Port were to be discontinued. I'd actually assumed that we would be going the other direction in every sense. In fact, when the new government was formed last year, I'd spoken to both Minister Ryan and Minister Naughton about this and expressed my assumption and wish that freight would be directed onto rail, increasingly so going forward, even aside from this particular issue, which I wasn't aware of at the time. Minister, I got into politics partly through, I suppose, the railways, in the sense that I set up a commuter group in my own village of Sallins for commuters loving to improve the railway service. And it's something that I passionately believe in for the movement of people and the movement of freight and the movement of goods. It's so much more comfortable, environmentally friendly, efficient. There are so many benefits that hardly need repeating for movement of people and of goods. And it's staggering to see that at a time when we have so many opportunities, when Brexit is actually favouring Irish ports with increases in traffic, when goods are coming more and more into Ireland as the gateway to Europe, when we're seeing opportunities across all of our ports, and we're seeing actually a spike in traffic, that all of a sudden Dublin Port would decide the right thing to do is to close down one arm of its service. I'm aware that the customs posts need to be there, and I'm aware that the various checks need to be done. I think there's 5 hectares devoted to it now in Dublin Port. It's a necessary evil. But the answer to an increase in business is not to contract your operation. Surely it is to expand. Surely it is to invest in it. And this isn't a situation, I mean, I could understand, I might regret, but I could understand if we were all here wringing our hands and lamenting the fact that the railway was being taken up because of a lack of business or lack of interest. But to add insult to injury, this is a successful commercial operation. This is one where, as Deputy Cleary has spoken about, Ballina has serviced about 5 to 7 trains a day. Coca-Cola have the operation, other firms may be involved. This is actually a successful enterprise that has been taken away, that's been stopped at the very moment when it's needed most, for environmental and lots of other reasons.
Thank you.
Minister, we made the mistake, we lifted up railways in this country before. Let's learn something from history, and let's not go down that road again.
Minister to reply.
Las Concurder agus leis na teachtaí. I would like to welcome an opportunity to update the House on the position regarding rail freight into Dublin Port on behalf of Ministers Ryan and Naughton. And let me start by saying that Minister Ryan and Minister of State Naughton strongly believe in the potential of rail freight and think it can play a bigger role in freight transport generally on this island. And both ministers have spoken specifically around the potential for rail freight and in the West as well. This is why, as part of the strategic rail review, they have included a specific focus on this topic. The review will also examine how our key ports are connected to the rail network and whether improvements are needed. The focus we're looking to bring to this issue replicate the focus at a European level, where there's a renewed push to examine rail freight corridors and their potential as part of the Green New Deal. Obviously, there are differences in terms of what the potential might be across different countries, including Ireland. However, it is clear in my mind that we should and can look to increase the modal share of rail freight from an environmental perspective and in terms of reducing congestion on our roads. Specifically, in relation to Dublin Port, the ministers are aware of the operational issues that have arisen in the port involving two private companies with regard to the facilitation of freight rail services there. This relates to capacity constraints that have occurred in a low-low terminal in the port that is impacting on the rail services. Just to give some background, Dublin Port is the largest and busiest port in the state, serving the trading needs of Ireland, with on average 70% of all vessel visits and over 50% of all tonnage handled by ports in Ireland. Since the end of the Brexit transition period last January, shipping services direct to the continent from Ireland have increased from around 36 Lo-Lo and Ro-Ro sailings a week in Q1 2020 to over 60 sailings direct to the continent now. The Irish Marine Development Office reports that in recent months on ROI EU direct services, Ro-Ro volumes increased by 81%, while Lo-Lo volumes increased by 11%. In Dublin Port, the Lo-Lo freight terminals are leased, managed and operated by private stevedoring companies. The rail line or spur in Dublin Port currently goes into the area where one of the stevedoring companies provides services for loading on and off containers from trains. Since January, with the increased level of sailings and the number of containers being handled in the port, this has led to significant pressures on space to cater for additional freight and the containers coming in by rail at the same time and location. Dublin Port, with an 85% share of all Ro-Ro trade in Ireland, provided 14.6 hectares, or almost 1/5 of its land, on the north side of the river to facilitate state services required post-Brexit, customs, agriculture, immigration, etc. At the same time, Dublin Port is undertaking its most ambitious development programme in over a century to future-proof the port by providing additional cargo handling capacity and infrastructure for larger vessels, which is essential to cater for a growing economy. In the 6 years prior to 2020 and COVID-19 pandemic, there was a 36% growth in freight at the port. As it undertakes this work, Dublin Port itself is experiencing pinch points with no spare space at present which can be provided for the container services. However, with the completion of the capital works at the port and the introduction of a range of measures to optimise operations, it is intended that further growth can be facilitated in the future, along with growth in rail services at the port. The ministers are aware that discussions are ongoing at present with all stakeholders involved, the two private companies along with Irish Rail and Dublin Port, to explore options to resolve these issues. The ministers strongly urge all parties to engage constructively in this dialogue to ensure that the continuation of the rail services into the port now and into the future.
Thank you, Laskin Curler. Minister, I know it's not your department, but the response is incredibly disappointing. You speak about Ministers Ryan and Naughton wanting to bring a focus to connecting key ports to the rail network. That is in place from Ballina. Long before Ministers Ryan and Naughton came into government, we have a service that's working well, that has massive potential, but has been stalled for reasons nothing to do with the service, or reasons to do with Dublin Port and the constraints there. And I accept that Brexit is a challenge, and I accept that there have been other challenges in the port in recent weeks, but it's 5 years since we had the Brexit referendum. There was time to put all of these things into place, and surely, given the size of Dublin Port, space should have been given, if it was a priority, for rail freight, and priority should have been given to rail freight. Minister, this is typical of the department's view of rail transport. We are being subject to another strategic rail review. Well, today, Minister, the Western Rail Committee have published a report by Dr. John Bradley, formerly of the SRI, into the feasibility of the Western Rail Corridor, and it debunks entirely the taxpayer-funded EY report, paid for and commissioned by the department.
Thank you, Deputy.
And a private volunteer-led organisation could debunk the state entirely, says volumes about the lack of commitment of the Department of Transport to rail freight and to rail transport in this country.
Thank you, Carla. Minister, like Deputy Cleary, I'm struggling to follow the reply. The reply seems to tell us that the port is very busy. It's getting busier. We already know that. That's the whole point of this topical. Why can't we use that extra capacity? Why can't we deliver that to put more freight onto the railways? Why are we actually discontinuing a vital service at the very time it's needed most, when the port is in an expansionary mode? I've actually gone through the reply a couple of times to see if I'm missing something, because the Minister is agreeing with us and then actually not proposing any solutions. I don't blame the Minister. The Minister has been dragged in to answer this topical tonight, but really it beggars belief. I see the evidence of this with my own eyes. We have enough trucks on the road already. I represent North Kildare, effectively serves as an outer M50. As trucks come off the N4 in the north to run to the N7 at the south, they don't bother going into the M15 to Dublin. They crisscross Clane, Sallins, Naas, Straffan, all the little villages, and Rash runs along the way. It's bad for North Kildare, it's bad for Ireland, it's bad for the environment. But it makes absolutely no sense at a time when it should be expanding. If Dublin Port can't handle it, perhaps Drogheda needs to go, perhaps Arklow needs to go, perhaps Deepwater Port and Phoenix needs to go. If Dublin Port isn't up to it, someone else can take over.
Thank you, Minister, to conclude.
Throughout the COVID-19 and Brexit, the Department worked with the ports and shipping companies to ensure sufficient capacity and connectivity to facilitate the movement of goods in and out of Ireland. Significant government investment has gone into the customs, agriculture and immigration inspection facilities necessary since the 1st of January 2021. And we have seen a remarkable response from the shipping sector in significant additional sailings direct to the continent as a result of the market demand, and have seen a sharp increase in demand for low-low services. It is important to point out that neither Minister for Transport nor the Department is directly involved in decisions taken by the privately operated terminal in Dublin Port. However, the Minister for Transport is very concerned that the question of the continuation of rail services into the port should arise at a time when the focus is on ensuring that our transport modes are environmentally, economically and socially sustainable. The Minister understands that discussions are continuing at present to explore a number of options to address the current situation. He encourages all parties to constructively engage to ensure that the difficulties are resolved as a matter of urgency so that Irish Rail can maintain and develop their services to the port. The ultimate aim is that freight rail continues to be facilitated at Dublin Port in line with government policy, particularly having regard to the strategic review of rail freight underway at present. It is also acknowledged that freight by rail can make a significant contribution to climate action initiatives and tackling road congestion. As I mentioned previously, the Department of Transportation, in consultation with the Department of Infrastructure Northern Ireland and other relevant stakeholders, is undertaking a strategic view of the heavy rail network on the island of Ireland. The Department launched the procurement process in April, and it is expected that work on the review itself will commence by the summer and take 12 months to complete. This will be one of the most significant reviews of the rail network on the island in many years and will provide a framework to develop a much improved rail network in the years ahead.
Moving on to the second topical in the names of Deputies Fergus O'Dowd and Jed Nash to discuss the need for a full-time Garda station in Laytown, County Meath. Fergus O'Dowd.
I thank the Count Corla for picking this debate. It's hugely important, and I appreciate fully that Garda resources are an issue for the for the Garda Commissioner, but people are very distressed and very concerned in East Meath, and they're right to be so. East Meath is one of the fastest growing areas in the country. The Garda station was built 20 years ago, meeting the needs of a quarter of the population that is presently there. When you compare all the electoral areas in Meath, Trim, Kells, Ashbourne, Navan, Ratoath, what have they all got in common? They all have a full-time 24/7 Garda station. They all have a superintendent. East Meath, Laytown, Bettystown, which has a further population of 34,000 to be added to by, I reckon, about 10,000 new homes over the next number of years, does not have those services, and it needs them urgently. The Garda Commissioner is aware of this, and he is listening to us. He met us in the Joint Policing Committee on the 6th of March last year, and he was aware of the boundary issue. issue between Meath and Louth to make sure that there could be hot pursuit of criminals in East Meath from Drogheda and vice versa if that was needed. The problem is that parents really are very upset with the way some children were assaulted there recently. And a couple of Sundays ago, the Garda dog unit, the Garda mounted unit had to be in the area to make sure that peace would prevail and that thugs and people out of their heads with drink and drugs would not be able to dominate social life over a very important weekend. Estates in Drogheda, like Rosevale, like Beaubec, you ring Ashbourne if you live in one half, 25 miles away, you live Drogheda if you live in the other half. Not good enough, not acceptable. The Minister is aware of it, and I've discussed it with her, also her department, but it's up to the actual Garda Commissioner, who has listened to us in Drogheda before. He gave us additional extra Gardaí following the appalling murder of Keith Mulready Woods. So let's have action now in East Meath. The people need it, the people demand it, and indeed there's one mother, Tanya O'Neill, is campaigning very strongly on this issue.
Thank you, Deputy Jed Nash.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's absolutely scandalous, Minister, that the electoral district with the second largest population in the county of Meath does not have a full-time Garda station. That is utterly indefensible. Now, I can't put it any simpler when I say that Laytown and the wider East Meath area demands and needs a 24/7, 7-day-a-week station. 3 weeks ago, as we know, a young Leaving Cert student, Jamie O'Neill, a local lad from Bettystown, was viciously beaten in a savage and unprovoked attack on Bettystown Beach. The policing district is managed out of Ashbourne and not Drogheda Station nearby, but the call that was made ended up in Kildare. This is utter madness. There are 22 guards at the moment in Laytown, up only marginally on 2016, and the area where the station is closed is managed by mobile dynamic patrols. The station now, until the crash and the cutbacks of 2008, had its own superintendent, and in fact there were plans to build a brand new station in the Laytown area to service the rapidly expanding East Meath and South Drogheda area. But responsibility was then given to Ashbourne, 30 kilometres away, to manage Laytown. Now, the area has trebled in size population-wise since 1996. It is not the small rural picture postcard hamlet that it used to be. Yes, it is still very beautiful. Yes, it is still one of my favourite places, but it has got bigger and the challenges have become more extreme. But the services have not been provided to respond to the population changes. It has suffered more than its fair share of poor planning decisions and poor public policy making in the last 20 years. Now, the people of the area are entitled to security. They're entitled to a full-time station. They're entitled to have their demands met as taxpayers and as citizens. And if we're not to agree with the emotional arguments that might be made to provide a full-time station, just look at the figures in terms of how that area has so rapidly expanded over the last few years and how it's going to expand again over the next few years in the context of the new draft Meath development plan.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Noonan.
On behalf of the Minister for Justice, I would like to thank both deputies for raising this important issue. The Garda Commissioner is responsible by law for the management and administration of Garda business, including distribution of members of the Gardaí throughout the state, and the Minister for Justice has no role in these independent functions. The determination of the need for the development of a new Garda station in Meath or at any other location will be considered by the Commissioner in the context of the overall accommodation requirements arising from the ongoing expansion of the Garda workforce and the availability of capital funding, as well as the implementation of a policing service for our future, the Government's implementation plan for the recommendations of the Commission on the future of policing in Ireland, and the new Garda operating model, which will inform the accommodation priorities for An Garda Síochána over the years 2022 to 2030. The Office of Public Works has responsibility for the provision and maintenance of Garda accommodation. Works in relation to Garda accommodation are progressed by the Garda authorities, working in close cooperation with the OPW. Again, the Minister for Justice has no direct role on these matters. I am assured that Garda management keeps the distribution of all resources under continual review in the context of crime trends and policing priorities to ensure their optimum use, and noting the crimes cited by both deputies here this evening. There has been a recent significant increase in Garda resources in Meath in recent years. As at the end of May 2021, a total of 322 Garda members were assigned to the Meath division, in addition to 43 Garda staff. These figures represented increases of 16% and 65% respectively since December 2015. Laytown Station in particular has had an inspector appointed in January of this year, indicating the commitment of Garda Síochána to that area. I am advised that local Garda management have taken steps to improve Garda coverage in the area, and these include increased frequency of patrols in affected areas, as well as regular support from the Divisional Operational Support Unit for the area. Meath Division is also one of 4 divisions earmarked by the Commissioner for the introduction of the new Garda operating model in the next year. The new operating model is envisaged to deliver improvements to structures, processes, services and governance, and there will be an increase in the number of frontline Gardaí. As the deputies will be aware, the Drogheda Building a Bridge to the Better Future report, recently published by Minister McAtee, carried out by Mr Vivian Gearan, a former director of the Probation Service, recommends that exploration of how to address the issue and the impact of county boundaries of Louth and Meath and the corresponding delineation between Garda districts and divisions, specifically in relation to the policing of the Laytown Bettystown area of East Meath, to be undertaken. An implementation plan for the report is due to be published by the Department of Justice shortly. And I wish to thank again the deputies for bringing this issue forward.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy O'Dowd.
I welcome the last paragraph of the Minister's statement. The Gearan report was set up following the appalling vile murders in the Drogheda area, and indeed there were murders also in East Meath, an execution of one person outside their own front door, and also there were people who are missing, believed murdered, generally in the same area. So it is a huge issue. I welcome the fact that the Gearan report has been referred to. And so that means that the Commissioner is now aware of the action that he must take. And he has listened to us before, and I want to stress this. I have every confidence in him acting on it, but he needs to act now, because the Tanya O'Neills of this world are not going to wait. They're not going to see their sons or daughters or children attacked and assaulted. They want proper, appropriate Garda service, and they're entitled to it now. And the Gardaí want to provide that service. It's just that they're not there. We need the additional Gardaí. The initiative of the Commissioner Drew in Drogheda was very welcome. We need a new initiative from him now in East Meath.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I mean, today I met with local Garda management and with Tanya O'Neill, James's mum, and she speaks for all local parents and she speaks for all local citizens, in fact, who are deeply frustrated, notwithstanding the good efforts of local Gardaí and local Garda management. This is not just an emotional argument. All of the evidence is there. I mean, CSO data shows a huge increase between 2018 and 2019 in public order offences in the area. They went up by 70%. There was an increase in recorded crime to the station in Laytown, something in the region of 15% between 2016 and 2019. And we have seen far too many gang-related criminal problems in the area, with some residents complaining that there is open drug dealing going on and people behaving with impunity. Now, only 7% of all Garda resources in the community are actually deployed to the East Meath area. Given the size of the Laytown, Bettystown, Mornington agglomerated area and South Drogheda, we're entitled to expect more. We're entitled to expect a full-time Garda station for these citizens and taxpayers to help them feel more secure and to support what is a great community that will develop further over the next few years.
Thank you, Deputy. Antara.
And again, on behalf of the Minister for Justice, I want to thank both deputies for raising this matter. I think it's vitally important, and they bring forward very serious issues in relation to crime in the area, again, which we have to tackle. I can assure you that community safety is a priority for this government and for Garda Síochána, and this is evidenced by the government's unprecedented Garda provision for this year, for 2021. In tandem with this year's record Garda budget, the Department's Justice Plan for 2021 contains a range of commitments focused on actively supporting communities to enhance the safety of all residents. These include the establishment of a special expert forum on antisocial behaviour, which has already helped to inform a new scheme to tackle the misuse of scramblers and quad bikes, as well as the launch in April of the new Youth Justice Strategy 2021 to 2027, which has a strong focus on diverting young people away from offending and building supports to provide prevention and early intervention in young people's lives. Antisocial behaviour will also be considered by the local community safety partnerships, which are to be set up at every local authority under the Department's new community safety policy. 3 pilot partnerships are currently being established in Dublin's North Inner City, Longford and in Waterford, and will run for the next 2 years ahead of a nationwide rollout, which is to be welcomed. I can assure the deputies that the Minister for Justice continues to meet the Garda Commissioner on an ongoing basis in relation to all Garda enforcement matters, and I would of course encourage any member of the public to report any incidents of assault or antisocial behaviour directly to Garda Síochána. Guramahagat.
Guramagadara, agus mogul midragati on Kedesh Ella, Sir Chakti Emin O'Queeve, Louise O'Reilly, agus Catherine Connolly, to discuss the need for clarity in the legality of consumption of alcohol at tables outside of restaurants and pubs. Each deputy has 1 minute and 20 seconds on Chakti O'Queeve.
My dad, Nivorna man, so come to West Kipway. Camera got Honic, and near the door, the Hulmish Geldardine, grow 5 in Ida, might live a frastal, alcohol, Tim Muggan, a pubany. I was going to be alone. Lormelish Nad and Nishin, I guess, Kakror Deshishi Rochas. Ach, Antago to be Rochas now go Hishkins. But I think it's interesting to read the Garda statement. It says licenses to sell alcohol are issued by the courts. The application for a license to sell alcohol is accompanied by the lodgement of inter alia, a site plan highlighting the specific area to which the license will apply. The licensee is licensed to sell intoxicating liquor to a person to consume the alcohol within that highlighted area only, and any other sales on a takeaway basis only. In other words, what they're saying is, if it's not on your license, it's illegal. Now, we cannot go ahead without clarity in the law, absolute clarity. And I suppose my question tonight to the Minister is, are we going to get either primary legislation or a new statutory instrument, whichever is needed and whichever will suffice, to get rid of any doubt in the law? Because it's not fair to be asking on Garda Síochána to show discretion that's contrary to the law.
O'Reilly.
Minister, what's happening at the moment is very much amateur hour stuff from the government. The Gardaí issue a statement. We have the Minister for Justice tweeting about it, incorrectly as it goes, because that now has to be corrected. The message was very clear from the government. We are going to have an outdoor summer. Restaurateurs knew what that meant, pub owners knew what that meant. We all thought we knew what that meant. But just to be clear, I asked on Taoiseach on the 13th of May, that's nearly 6 weeks ago, would he ensure that a plan was put in place to make sure that everybody was on board, everybody knew what they were supposed to be doing, everybody knew the rules. He agreed that a plan would be necessary. Nothing was done. This is absolutely shambolic. It's as if you don't realise the hundreds of thousands of jobs that depend on you getting this right. Gurmaigat.
Thank you very much. I welcome the opportunity, however short, to raise this with you, Minister, because I have a slightly different view on this. First of all, I think the Guards have done us a favour in highlighting the difficulties that they're facing in being asked to use their discretion. I think that's extremely difficult, and we know from the history in various tribunals that it's just not possible. So I think the problem has arisen from the message given by the government of an outdoor summer. But unfortunately, that outdoor summer simply means more consumption, and we will help with more consumption as to a broader interpretation of what an outdoor summer means. So in Galway, we have clear bylaws that say you cannot drink on the streets. Those bylaws didn't happen overnight. They happened as a result of continuous pressure from various people because drinking was out of control. Now, rather than recognise that was the position and having a balanced approach to the reopening of pubs, which I fully agree with, what we did was focused on an outdoor drinking situation station, and in my opinion it's totally wrong, because we should have opened all pubs to reduce the pressure, albeit with restricted capacity. So what I'm asking here tonight is not just for clarity, but for a more healthy message for the government as to what an outdoor summer means, while still facilitating the businesses in Galway and elsewhere.
Carlock, and again I want to thank Deputies Connolly, O'Keefe and O'Reilly for raising this important issue and for giving me an opportunity to address it on behalf of Minister Humphreys. Following public health guidance, government policy is to have a gradual reopening of the hospitality sector, beginning with outdoor hospitality before a decision is taken on resuming indoor service in a few weeks. Many of our bars and restaurants have now reopened, serving outdoors, and this is giving people a welcome opportunity to safely meet with friends and family again. As An Garda Síochána have made clear, the overwhelming majority of licensed premises have behaved responsibly, and those who continue to behave responsibly in controlling their premises should have nothing to worry about. Gardaí all across the country use their discretion every day to police as the circumstances require, as they have done throughout the pandemic, and work closely with restaurants and pubs to ensure the safety of the public. An Garda Síochána will continue to adopt a graduated approach to the public health guidelines. Members of An Garda Síochána will engage with the public, as well as to encourage and educate with regard to the public health guidelines, as they have done throughout the pandemic. This is often a delicate balance, and there are different legal situations in different parts of the country, depending on whether there are local authority bylaws in place. A small minority of pubs have been serving alcohol to those seated outside agreed areas, and clearly that will be the focus of any Garda action in the first instance. Minister Humphreys has discussed the matter with the Garda Commissioner Harris a number of times and did so again yesterday morning. The Commissioner has since issued a communication to Regional Assistant Commissioners and that the Gardaí should use discretion while continuing to respond to public complaints about public order issues, parking, noise, etc. The Commissioner has reassured Minister Humphreys that discretion will continue to be applied by the Gardaí in their engagement with licensed premises. Both the Commissioner and Minister Humphreys are satisfied that the Irish people can be facilitated to enjoy a safe outdoor summer, while the Gardaí continue with their difficult work to keep people safe. The Attorney General and Minister Humphreys have also spoken on this matter to their officials and will work closely along with the Department of Housing to examine this matter in full. It's a complex area of law, as I'm sure the deputies can appreciate, but Minister Humphreys has committed to taking legislative action if necessary. And again, just in relation to specific points raised by Deputy O'Reilly, I don't agree with the contention that it's shambolic. I think we have, I think government has managed and put in place a level of adequate supports to help facilitate a safe and socially distanced outdoor summer, and the messaging is from a whole of government approach is getting out. Deputy Connolly raises a significant and important point about spreading the impact across towns and cities. It's certainly of consideration, but I do think that government has made good strides in working with all partners, with local authorities, and working with local communities, with vintners, with hoteliers, with the services sector, to put in place a good set of proposals and a good set of supports to ensure that we can have a safe and a very enjoyable outdoor summer of 2021.
Each deputy is 40 seconds. Jack O'Keefe.
Minister, I'd like to thank you for the reply, but it gets more confusing every time somebody speaks on the subject, because on the first page you say there's often a delicate balance that there are different legal situations in different parts of the country depending on whether there are local authority bylaws in place. Well, that's true, but is that the problem in this case? If it is, you tell Galway to sort out their local authority problem, but then in the last paragraph you make it clear that in fact it mightn't be that at all, it might be primary law. Now, when the Gardaí went to the premises, they must have known under what law they approached the licensed people in Galway. And therefore, there cannot be this great complex problem there, because the Gardaí cannot approach anybody without having a basis in law. So are the government going to bring forward amending legislation to rectify this issue, or are they saying unequivocally, without doubt, that this is a matter for the local authority and their bylaws?
O'Reilly.
See, when I say shambles, this is what I'm talking about. So your script that you read out says Minister Humphreys has committed to taking legislative action if necessary. The Independent, the last hour and a half, is reporting Justice Minister Heather Humphreys will bring legislative changes on pubs and restaurants selling alcohol in their outdoor seating areas in the coming days. So that is the message that people who are fighting really hard to save their businesses, workers who want their jobs to survive this, they are getting mixed messages, Minister, and I do believe that they deserve some clarity, as well as the members of Garda Síochána. They're being asked to police this, and I don't believe that they are being given sufficient guidance by the government on this. As I said, I raised this issue 6 weeks ago with the Taoiseach. You've had a long time to plan for this. We shouldn't be having this conversation now at this late stage. And in the intervening time, will you issue guidance? Will you issue some sort of clarity for those people who are going to be expected to deal with this mess that you have created?
Deputy Connolly.
Thank you. Minister, I think you're failing to grasp the significance of what's happening here. We're given a message that you take over public space and serve alcohol, which is against the bylaws, which prevents alcohol in public spaces. That's one message, and you're placing the guards in an impossible position. Another message that I'd like to get out here: Galway City Council passed the Barcelona Declaration almost 20 years ago, guaranteed universal access to all our residents, to the streets of Galway, to services, regardless of ability and age. There's a balancing of rights here, in addition to the businesses, which has not been looked at all, and we're focusing in on law. To me, the law is quite clear. You get a licence to serve drink on the premises. You can take it outside and drink unless there are bylaws, and we have those bylaws in Galway. But the message for an outdoor summer must be healthier than just consumption of alcohol and drink and taking over public spaces. It must be much fairer and broader than that, and inclusive. That's the problem.
As I said, Garda Síochána have made clear the overwhelming majority of licensed premises have behaved responsibly, and those who continue to behave responsibly in controlling the premises should have nothing to worry about. A tiny minority of pubs have been serving alcohol to those seated outside agreed areas, and clearly this will be the focus of any Garda action in the first instances. Many cities have bylaws in place. Local authorities have facilitated pubs with permission for outdoor seating and grants, and these have been made available to many businesses. We want to work with the Gardaí and need to be able to control matters as needed to prevent things from getting out of hand. Gardaí all across the country use their discretion every day to police as the circumstances require, as they have done throughout the pandemic, and work closely with restaurants and pubs to ensure the safety of the public. I trust that members will act in accordance with the Commissioner's instruction and will continue to adopt a graduated approach to the public health guidelines in the interest of public safety and order. But the Government is clear that if we need to take further action, we will, and Minister Humphreys is currently discussing what further measures may be needed with the Attorney General and Government colleagues. And again, I think in relation to Deputy Connolly's point about the messaging on outdoor summer, it is much broader. It is about the enjoyment of outdoor spaces of nature. We're asking for a responsible enjoyment of the summer of outdoors, and I think those messages have begun in media campaigns this week. So I think it is much broader than just consumption. It's much broader than just around consumption of alcohol in our towns and cities. It is about enjoying what the country has to offer on a broader scale as well. So we are cognizant of that messaging and are beginning to get that message out this week.
Garmagadara agus on Came Dernach in Synonymous Chapter Desi Ellis to discuss Irish Water's responsibilities with regard to reported faults as well as the maintenance of water and sewerage infrastructure. You have 4 minutes, Deputy.
Minister, the transfer of responsibilities for water from the local authorities to Irish Water has created many problems. The process of reporting issues is cumbersome and frustrating for myself as a public representative. So you can imagine how it would try the patience of an ordinary citizen. When a problem is reported to Irish Water, they in turn utilise the water services, staff and equipment of Dublin City Council and other councils.
officials. If I was to go directly to the council to report an issue, I would be told to contact Irish Water first, which is a ridiculous situation. Even though there is a dedicated elected rep support email, in my experience, this system does not necessarily address the issues any quicker, and I and my colleagues in my constituency have had to pursue issues to the point of exasperation, sending email after email to the Irish Water rep's address to try and get the problems we have raised resolved. Many of the answers that come back, I have found, show a lack of understanding of the problem raised and are often inaccurate. This method for raising issues with Irish Water is nothing more than a sop to public reps. Lack of effective communication and an inability to liaise directly with senior management raises concerns for both transparency and accountability. Elderly residents, families with small children, people with disabilities or long-term illnesses and so on are severely affected by any disruption to their water supply. Therefore, it is essential that the customer service side of Irish Water is effective and public reps should have access to senior management. I'm also concerned that works carried out by Irish Water have caused secondary problems such as airlocks and low water pressure. On McKee Avenue in Finglas last Saturday, after Irish Water had completed works in the area, residents, including a number of elderly people, were left without a water supply all weekend and all day Monday up until this morning. It appears that there was no advance notice of these works. In St Canice's Court of Finglas, in a similar situation where works were carried out by Irish Water, residents were left with a disruption to their water supply, and the issues around water pressure are still ongoing. When these problems are raised with Irish Water, I find that they effectively abdicate their responsibility and in many cases are putting the onus on the homeowner affected to rectify the problem. Another example of this is where the roots of a tree have penetrated a sewage pipe, causing a sewage blockage. The affected pipe is located outside the boundaries of a private residence on Collins's Avenue extension. However, Irish Water are of the view that it is the responsibility of the homeowner to fix the problem. This is not an isolated case, and in this and other cases it is clear that Irish Water are not doing proper investigations, which would lead them to a different assessment as to who has responsibility for fixing such problems. Irish Water also need to look at the policy of patching up works after initial completion. In many instances, the patching of roads and pathways have left them in a terrible condition for months on end before they are properly reinstated. I am concerned that there is a proposal for Irish Water to incorporate Dublin City Council's drainage section in July. This is a real worry in light of Irish Water's failures to date. They need to get their house in order before they should even consider taking on this responsibility. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Deputy for raising the issue today and allowing me the opportunity to outline the position in respect of Irish Water's responsibility in this regard. The Water Services Acts of 2007 to 2017 set out the arrangements in place for the delivery of water and wastewater services by Irish Water and for the scrutiny and oversight provisions that apply in respect of those arrangements. Since the 1st of January 2014, Irish Water has statutory responsibility for all aspects of water services planning, delivery and operation at national, regional and local levels, including with respect to water supply interruptions and communication with customers and the maintenance of water and wastewater infrastructure. Irish Water is independent in the exercise of its statutory functions and in relation to day-to-day operational matters. In assuming responsibility for water services from local authorities, Irish Water has entered into service level agreements with each local authority for the provision of water services. Staff members working under these arrangements remain local authority employees while continuing to perform key water services functions with local authorities acting as agents of Irish Water. As part of the operational model established by the Oireachtas, it is important to note that the Commission for the Regulation of Utilities, or CRU, in its role as economic regulator of Irish Water, has an important role in regulating and protecting the interests of Irish Water customers. One of the key ways the CRU protects customers is through the Irish Water Customers Handbooks, which sets out how Irish Water must deal with its domestic and non-domestic customers. In the case of planned interruptions for operational reasons or for other service incidents, the handbook details how Irish Water must communicate with its customers. These handbooks are available on the CRU website. Planned supply interruptions can occur for maintenance reasons or in relation to planned works undertaken by local authority staff or third-party contractors on behalf of Irish Water. Unplanned interruptions can often be the result of a fault in the network or related to a severe weather event and are usually responded to in the first instance by the relevant local authority under the service level agreement with Irish Water. Irish Water assures me that it makes every effort to deliver on the responsibilities and keeping such interruptions to a minimum to the extent possible, and thus minimising the impact on its customers. And again, to assure Deputy Ellis, we, all Oireachtas members and councillors, would use the REPS service. I have to say, personally, I find it good, and I suppose there's, I take on board the points made in terms of that it's a different way, certainly, and it took a bit of getting used to from when we would make that direct representation through a local authority. But certainly, I think I generally find any reps that I would make in relation to water or wastewater infrastructure or emergency situations to be good with Irish Water. But again, there's always room for improvement in this regard.
Gormagat Dara and Teach Ellis.
Thanks, Minister. Minister, I think the original purpose of changing over to Irish Water and moving all the services to the local authorities was to privatise it. The people got out in the streets and stopped that. And now it seems as though we're going to keep Irish Water in public ownership, and that's the right thing. But it was already in public ownership in the local authorities, and that was the best place for it to be. But that be it may, we are now in the situation where Irish Water is there. I am outlining the problems that we're facing as public reps when we're dealing with them, and the problems that residents are encountering when there's a problem on the system. And in some cases, like I pointed out, where they went out to fix the fault so-called was fixed, and then when it was packed up, then we discover that houses are knocked off, whether they're most of them private houses and elderly and other people, and there's airlocks and there's other things happening. We have to have a mechanism to deal with that. We can't just turn around and say to people, it's your responsibility. Many of these are senior citizens, pensioners, and they're left to hand out a large bill to try and sort out a problem that they never had. So it's just not good enough. We need to have better mechanisms. The handbook needs to be revisited with some of these issues, in my opinion, because I've encountered it on a number of occasions. In a lot of occasions, Irish Water have reacted reasonably well, but there are a lot of occasions that I pointed out where there hasn't been a proper reaction, and people are really angry over it. And the residents that I have spoken to only this morning are absolutely fuming over what happened. They weren't even given warnings. There was no one sent even a letter around from door to door, which to me is the most sensible thing to do, especially if you have people who are there with sick people and otherwise, to give them an opportunity to store water and be ready for a cut-off. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. And Tara?
I think Deputy Ellis raises important points, and I think particularly in relation to sending out notification, communication, effective communication. So I think those points are important for Irish Water to take on board. The Water Services Act places specific responsibilities on the Minister and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, including responsibility for matters relevant to water policy, funding and in the making of regulations. The Water Services Act also puts in place a variety of legislative and regulatory controls to ensure governance, oversight and accountability in relation to water services. Irish Water is subject to significant regulation and oversight from the EPA in relation to environmental compliance and the CRU in relation to economic regulation, including customer service. The Oireachtas also established the Water Advisory Body to report to the Oireachtas on Irish Water's performance. For example, in relation to the boil water notice arising from problems at the leak slip treatment plant in 2019, the CRU carried out an audit of the Irish Water response to check compliance with the standards laid down in the Customer Services Handbook. This audit is also available on the CRU website. As I've outlined, Irish Water assures my department that it makes every effort to deliver on its responsibilities to keep service interruptions to a minimum extent possible and to comply with its obligation under the Customer Services Handbooks in relation to communicating with customers. But I do note the points made by Deputy Ellis, and I think it is, as I said in my first contribution, we can always improve on the communication and improve on the level of service that's being provided to the public. In relation to the points raised, in particularly in relation to McKee Avenue and Finglas, it's my understanding that that burst water main has now been repaired. I think this is probably the initial query brought forward by Deputy Ellis in that regard. But again, I thank him for bringing this issue forward this evening.
Agus tá dálar athló go dtí gánáid déag tar éis ní máidir na mórach. The Dail stands adjourned until 9:12 a.m. very precise tomorrow. Iwa.